Hey guys, welcome to the Smart Venture Podcast. In each episode, we're going to have conversations with some of the top investors, superstar founders, as well as well-known tech company executives in Silicon Valley. We'll have a coffee chat with them to learn their way of thinking and actionable tips on how they build or invest in a successful company. Before we start our show today, I want to make sure the listener, aka you, understand that everything a person say on the podcast only reflects hers or his own opinion, not the show or the company they work at. Our guest today is a CMO at Matterport, a leading 3D technology company that enables professionals to edit and share 3D models of physical spaces. Prior to that, he served as a CMO at WeWork and worked as a marketing executive at multiple tech companies like LinkedIn, Box, and Salesforce. He is also the founding member, advisor, and investor at ByFounders, where he advises and invests in early-stage tech companies. His name is Robin Daniels. Welcome to the show, Robin.
Hey, Grace. Good to see you.
First of all, happy birthday, Robin. For all the listeners out there, Robin is a must follow. He is definitely one of the most positive executive on social media, and the positive energy is really contagious.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was my birthday yesterday, March 14th.
Pi Day.
The same day as Einstein and Pi Day. So it's very memorable. I have a lot to live up to, but it was fun. I was surrounded by family and friends, and it was a lovely day. You know, in this time, what more could you really ask for?
Yeah. So what is it like to have the same birthday with Albert Einstein and on Pi Day?
Well, first of all, I don't know how many people know that it's Einstein's birthday, except when I tell them. I don't think it's something that people go and think about too much. They know Pi Day a lot more. It's like, oh, it's Pi Day. So I often get oh, that's a memorable day, which is good. And it's, it's weird. We locked down basically a year ago, and now it's been more or less a full year in lockdown, or states of lockdown, open, close, you name it. And it's been the wildest year of my life. I was at WeWork in 2019, and that I thought was a wild year. It was crazy, intense. It was fun. It was emotional, ups and downs, incredible experience. This last year has been unlike anything else. Learning to deal with the constant uncertainty of the state of the world, the isolation, the loneliness, the not being with people. And I love being with people. I think that's a way I get energy from. It's been challenging, but at the same time, I think, wow, it's taught us so much about resilience and grit, which you can't read about. I've said this before on some of the platforms you mentioned. You can't really teach resilience and grit to people, I don't think, anyway. And I know there are books out there who probably would argue otherwise, but I think you have to live through some things. And talk about living through some things in those last year. I think it's taught us a lot of good things about ourselves, how to connect more meaningfully, even with people that we are loose connections with. How to focus on the things that make us truly happy, how to spend energy on the things that give us joy, and how to really think about how do we create a better world. I think once we come out of this, and we are coming out of this slowly, I think you're going to see so much great energy from people towards how do we create a better world for all of us, a world worth fighting for. So that gives me tremendous just hope and optimism for the future. And I think back, I'll tell you a quick story. My grandfather was in the Danish resistance movement during the Second World War. And in March of 1945, he was captured by the Gestapo. And he was beaten, and he was tortured, and he was ultimately sentenced to be executed. But then the war ended in early May. And it was kind of a lucky break because he did not get executed. And he managed to get out alive, and I just think about, everything's about perspective. It's been a hard year, but when you think about what that generation went through with the wars and just the massive uncertainty and constant fear, I think we'll get through this fine. We'll get through this fine, and we'll be stronger for it.
Wow. That really put me into perspective. I'm glad that he got out alive. And this is compared to back then. I feel like we're so lucky nowadays. Even people complain about how terrible the Uber Eats are. But anyway, so everything else is just amazing.
Exactly. And I don't want to take away from the fact that it was hard. I mean, a lot of people died. People lost their jobs. A lot of uncertainty and the isolation, I think, and mental strain has been really hard. But I also think it's about perspective. I mean, living through a war like that, and there's still wars going on in the world, right? It's everything is about perspective. And so if we're going to be tested, I think this is one of the ways that hopefully we'll come out stronger for some of those reasons of like bringing more unity and focus to each other about what makes us special, each other. Really.
100%. Speaking of the pandemic, you entered your new job at the beginning of the pandemic. Have you ever met people on your team in person or just over Zoom?
I have met a few of them. I'll tell you. So I left WeWork in November of 2019, and I was going to take some time off because it was just such an intense experience. And I was talking to a bunch of companies around the world, in Denmark, in England, in the US. And I ended up finally accepting a job at Matterport because I was really excited about what we're doing. I think it's just such a cool thing. And I was actually first introduced to Matterport when I worked at WeWork. But I met the CEO back in December of 2019. We hit it off. I loved his vision he was sharing. But it was a casual conversation. And then he's like, let's meet again. So we met again in January 2020. And then we hit it off again, and we really had some good conversation. And then he said, you should come meet some more people. So I met some more of the executive team members, Gene, our head of people, and Jay, our chief revenue officer, and a few more people. That was during February. And then we negotiated, and I finally said, okay, I'm going to join the company. Thanks for inviting me to be part of the tribe. And then right as I was accepted, the whole world shut down. So I joined without having met anybody in the marketing team or really most of the people in the executive team. And so I was introduced over Zoom, and I was introduced over email, and here's your new leader. And it was just kind of an odd way to start. I love getting to know people, especially in the early days. Let's go for a walk and tell me about yourself, your aspirations. What do you like to do? What do you not like to do? How can I help you be successful? All those things. That was much harder to do because on Zoom, everything becomes, I think, a little bit more flat. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but if you're in an office with people and you tell someone, let's go into a conference room and have a conversation, it already feels a little bit more artificial because you're in the constraints of this conference room and weird lighting. I always prefer let's go for a walk or let's go have lunch somewhere and have a natural conversation about each other. And so now it feels like every meeting is like you're in a conference room. It's a little bit forced and it's a little bit unnatural. So I think you can certainly break down the barriers. And I've, as a leader, have had to learn how to overcome my bias for remote work and how to really break down the barriers with my team and other team members across the company. But it hasn't been easy. There's certainly been times when I really have missed that human connection. I think for one-on-one, Zoom, Google Hangouts, awesome. When you have a group meeting, it's a little challenging, especially to try to force some of those creative conversations because you don't have a natural flow of energy. Oftentimes, if you're doing especially a creative conversation, well, that's on marketing, but it could also be creative conversation about problem solving some big strategic challenges that the business has. If you're in a conference room, there's a natural flow of energy. Somebody saying something, another person speaks on top of that and builds on it, and it kind of flows from person to person. And it's like, it becomes 1 + 1 = 5 suddenly. It's really powerful. It's very hard to do over Zoom because everything is, okay, all right, okay, now Susan, your turn to talk, and now Joe, it's your turn to talk, right? It doesn't flow in the same way. But it also gives me hope again that I know I'm not the only one feeling it. So there's so much innovation going into how do we optimize the platforms for not just productivity and efficiency, which they are optimized for, but how do we optimize them for humanity and creativity and these kind of moments that we need to create?
For sure. I can imagine, it's really hard to not talk over each other over Zoom just because, I feel you, all the creativeness, you have to really piggyback on each other's idea, then each person have a set period to talk. Have you tried group text? I'm just kidding. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, we use Slack, right? So that's basically a group text. And that also works great for offline asynchronous communication. But I also think sometimes a lot of things are lost in that communication form. I don't think I'm necessarily the best marketing leader, but one of my strengths is the way I can hopefully communicate an idea and enthusiasm about that idea and get other people to believe in it and want to do it with me and go execute it. And that's hard to do over Slack, right? So it's about learning how to, for me anyway, how to deal with these different mediums. Slack is great for updates, I think, here's how this project status is, or checking in on something, but it's not always great again for certain things. And then we also use text. We have email and text and Slack and Zoom
everywhere,
and everywhere, right? And they all have their place. I think if you're trying to just check in with somebody, you can tell they had a bad day. I think text is much more powerful. Just send them a text message saying, hey, I can tell you we're a little down today. What's going on? Or even calling. We can't underestimate the power of a phone call. I think hearing somebody's voice without having to see him on screen is super powerful. And I think it's a good thing to do as a leader, as well as agree when you're connecting with people, how to do it ahead of time. Like Zoom to Zoom, it's great. Audio to audio, it's great. Zoom, and if I'm off camera, it's super weird. If you're just talking into a black screen and you're just hearing my voice, it's always super awkward. So I think, learning to deal with it, right? But if you're just trying to have a little bit human conversation, and calling somebody's great. It's just great.
Yeah, 100%. You have a really positive energy. And before that, we chat about how you built relationship with the recruiters, and then you're really being really responsive to anyone who reach out to you. In terms of building these relationships, what is the most effective way during the pandemic, or even after the pandemic? A lot of people were predicting people would be working remotely for the rest of their career. So curious, what's your perspective on that? How do you build these stronger relationships in that case?
It definitely takes work. I've been at Matterport for about a year now, and some of the relationships where I think normally it would probably have taken 3 to 6 months to really get close to someone takes more like 6 to 9 months. But I've seen that happen now. It just takes a little bit longer because I'm not running into somebody in the hallway and saying, "Hey, how's it going? How was your weekend?" It's again, it's that formal. We have a one-on-one, and now it's in a conference room. It's a little bit more. So you have to work at it. You have to open up, be vulnerable, ask good questions, get to know the person, their mental model of what makes them happy and so on, and that's okay. Are they introverted or extroverted? What gives them joy? What makes them happy? Well, what's their family situation? All you have to learn, and that just takes time. It just takes time. You can't rush it really. But I also think, when I think about the future of work, I think that we're going to see a future that's going to be this blend, this hybrid model. And the reason why, I think a lot of pundits were quick to say that the office is dead and people are going to work remotely forever. I think that's complete BS. The reason why the office is dead is because we had no other choice. It's not like anybody chose this new way of working. And I have yet to meet anybody who says, this is awesome. I love just sitting in my own room all day, every day, 300 days, 365 days a year. I'm not. Now, it has a lot of benefits. You don't have to sit and waste a lot of time in a commute. You can actually get more focused time to really work on meaningful things. I think you save a lot of travel time, which we used to do. I used to travel a lot for work. That's been great. I get more family time, friend time, which is awesome. But we also miss each other. Nearly everybody I've talked to at Matterport misses the moments when they can get together. But again, they don't want to get together every day, but a few times a month, maybe, they want to get together and share some, ideas, lunch, and talk about some work things that need that in-person energy. So I think the future is going to be massively blended because as far as I can tell from the people I speak to, they really miss this notion of getting back together again. I've actually, when this first started happening, when the pandemic hit and everything was locked down, we invited some guest speakers into our company to speak to us about how do you set up a remote culture and how do you set up remote work and everything else. And what was interesting actually about this is even the companies who've been remote from day one, and there are quite a few companies out there who have done that, even said that a big part of their magic is that once a quarter, they would all get together. And when they get together, it's not about work. It's about the social aspect of getting team members to meet each other, do games and have fun and all kinds of things. So even those companies who are remote, they're still trying to find ways to create culture. Because I think it's a little bit more challenging sometimes to create that culture when you're not together and sharing some of those moments. Now, it's not impossible, but it's harder, I think. And so I think it's going to be blended. I really do. But we'll see. I'm not an expert on this, that's for sure.
I mean, yeah, I feel like the office environment is not gonna completely going away. It definitely requires more effort to collaborate and build that work culture when working remotely. As someone who also came from another country to the US, I have to say I really admire your success. I feel like it's probably have a lot to do with your positive attitude. I'm curious, where did it come from? Your mom is from America, your dad is from Denmark. At one point, you book a one-way ticket to the US. I feel like it was definitely one of the most American thing I've heard. How do someone become so positive and ambitious and driven?
I grew up, I was born and raised in Denmark. My father was Danish and my mother was American. So I think I always had this, I think, groundedness of a lot of Danes have, with the ambition of a lot of Americans have, and the idea that anything is possible, can-do attitude, let's go make shit happen. It's like really there's like, just as long as I apply energy and passion to it, I can make it happen. So I think a little bit of the one thing I've always admired about Denmark is the values that society has. This notion of always taking care of each other, of being very family oriented, friend oriented, society oriented, but still allowing for individualism and growth. But America is much more extreme on that. It's much more about the individual and the growth. And that can also has its downsides. Something like, I lived for the last 20 years in the US, and oftentimes I thought to myself, it's a real shame there's no like safety net for people. So there's so many people left behind in society. I remember I met my wife about 20 years ago, and I took her to Denmark, like after we were dating for a few months. And we walked around Copenhagen, and I remember her saying to me, "Where are all the homeless people?" And I said, "We don't have homeless people in Denmark. We as a society have solved the problem of homelessness, more or less, right?" It was a grand statement. And then you look in the US, I've lived in the Bay Area for a long time, and it's just rampant there. And you just think to yourself, yes, there should be room for people to absolutely crush it, do well for themselves. I have no issue with people making a ton of money and building great companies and having wealth and all that and being happy. But there also needs to be a sense of looking out for each other. And, you think about the Bay Area, one of the richest areas in the world, with just so much wealth. And there was just this weird dichotomy in how I think we looked after each other. So I think that the dark side of like capitalism and individualism is that notion of every person for themselves, which is that really the kind of world I want to live in? So I've always tried to, in my philosophy, and maybe that comes from my parents who are both super hippies, they wrote spiritual books and they still do, and all those kind of things about making the world a better place and so on. I would assume I probably inherited a lot from them. This notion of always, how can we make the world better for everyone? How do I give back as much as I can? It's not just about me, it's about everyone. Of course, a big part of it's about you. You have to focus on making yourself better and happier, because it's hard to give back to the world if you're deeply unhappy yourself. So it's a little bit of both. But I think that probably came a lot. I think my attitude probably is a lot of that philosophy. We grew up, they were hippies. They were very poor, my parents, but they weren't poor in love. They were poor in material wealth. But they gave us love, myself and my two brothers that I had who are older than me. I'm the youngest of three. And so they gave us love, and they gave us as much as they could from that perspective. But then they also tried to really work hard to create a world and a success for their life, whatever that meant. And success is it's so individual. It means so many different things. It's not about how much money you make. It's like, are you making an impact? Are you making a difference? Are you happy? Are you giving back and all these things? And I think about my parents, I don't think that they never reached a level of like material success that people would look at in the world, but they've certainly reached a level of, I would say, spiritual success, which I think is important. So that's part of it. And then in terms of just like, keeping like how I think about ambition and success, well, for me, there's always something to aspire to. I'm never honestly satisfied with where I am. I can always do better. Now, that's not to say that I'm not proud of how far I've come. In the last 20 years, I've worked at some great companies. I've had some decent successes, but I always think there's so much more to do. I honestly think it might sound weird, but I've only been working for 22, 23 years. I'm like, I have another 22, 23 years easily. Like what difference and impact can I do in the next 22, 23 years? And what will my life look like at that point in time? I'm always thinking about that future. I want to learn from the past, both my own and also the world's, but I never dwell in it. I never dwell in the past. I always look to the future. That's what keeps me happy anyway.
Yeah, I really love that. Like what you said, material success may not give you happiness. Look at your growth journey. You came from Denmark to the US, didn't have any connections, booked a one-way ticket, working at startups. You experienced market crash back in time. You've been through everything. Now you're really successful compared to your peers who started their career around the same time, who did not achieve this certain level of success. What differentiates you from everyone else? Would you say it's an attitude?
It's such a hard question because it's not something I've honestly asked them, so it's a little weird. But I would assume, here's what I would assume. If you look at my background, it's not like I went to Stanford or Harvard. I don't have an MBA from those schools, and it's not like I've just had like a straight line career either. I think what has made me successful is a big part of the energy and enthusiasm I show up with, and the idea of never giving up. I will work my ass off to make the team and the company successful, whatever it takes. And sometimes it means really getting all the way to the edge of nearly burning out. But I've always had this philosophy that my enthusiasm and energy and positivity is infectious. And if I can get other people to believe in that or be part of that and makes them better and more happy, then we together collectively can be really successful. I think about my background. I know so many great marketing leaders out there, CMOs, who I admire so much, and just incredible people. And so when I rank myself against them, I'm like, I'm not the best CMO in the world in terms of just the pure raw skills of being a CMO. But I think, when it comes to the energy that what I can bring is, again, my enthusiasm and my energy and my positivity for something, and my focus on asking the right question that brings out the best traits in somebody else. So, if I surround myself with great people, which I'd like to think that I do, then getting them to realize what's possible and even exploring parts of themselves or their work that they didn't even realize they could do is what makes us all much better. So I think that's probably part of what attracts people to me when they've come after me. Because if I go to an interview, which I've done many times in the last 20 years, I've always thought, I just need one shot to have a conversation with someone. It's very hard to get your foot in the door. And I said this on LinkedIn before, the key is get your foot in the door somewhere. And if you have passion and enthusiasm and you've done your research and you can connect with someone, that is the biggest thing that you can do. And I always thought, I've applied for a lot of jobs in my time, and suddenly now people are coming after me. And if I can just have a conversation with someone, then that can oftentimes be a big leg up towards anything else. And so again, I'm trying to, as much as I can. It's been a little hard in this last year with the remote work, is how do I pay that forward? How do I open doors for other people? I'm here, I'd like to think, because at some point, somebody took a chance on me. They believed in me. They saw something in me. They said, Robin has some skills and I'm going to nurture that. And my first boss in the US was a woman named Elise Zimmerman, and she was great. And she took a chance on me and said, she took me under her wing, and she kind of put me on this path. And I've had many great people throughout my life. Woodson Martin, who hired me at Salesforce, took a chance on me. I mean, at that point in time, it wasn't a guarantee that I could come in and do the job, but he took a chance on me and he paid it forward. And now I'm trying to do the same, because everybody, I think, just needs somebody to believe in them at some point.
That's so well said. I feel like being on your team seems really lucky. It seems like there's no bad day for you. I really like your energy. You're super motivational. I like what you said about it just takes someone to give you the first chance to get yourself into the door. Do you think it's a numbers game? Should people just apply to every job?
That's a good question. It's I don't think it's just applying to every job. I think it's being a little bit more intentional. And that's, of course, easier said than done. I totally get that. I don't want to come across as just the privilege of not having that. But if you can, I think, figuring out a connection point, honestly, is so much more powerful than just reaching out cold. And I know that's, if you're just starting out your career, that's really tough. I actually found my first job at a job fair. It was in Santa Clara Convention Center. I was walking around and I met this company, Streaming 21, and they were applying, and I went over and I talked to somebody, but it was that connection, I think, that made them say, hey, you should come in and chat with the team. So do whatever you can, I would say, in order to create a connection, create an opening somehow. If you just go out and you say, apply for 100 jobs, and you don't put any, a lot of thought into it, like who's behind it, who's actually the hiring person and so on, I think it's very tough. That doesn't mean you can't be successful. And so what I see now, a lot of smart people, they reach out to me directly on LinkedIn, which is both great, but also a little times overwhelming, because I'm like, oh, that's a lot of people reaching out to me. Whenever I post a job, it's like a lot of people reach out. But it's good because I can tell they're trying to do a personal connection. And I really appreciate the ones that have done some research on me, or the company, or the job itself. They come prepared and say, it's like, hey, I saw you posted this. Here's what I would recommend. Can we have a conversation? A lot of times it'll end up in, yes, absolutely we can. Or else I'll try to give you a good reason why not. I hate when people do not do their homework. It's just lazy. And there's a lot of them out there too who just doesn't even go in and read my profile. I mean, I get sometimes asked for insights or information, things that I have no experience or relation to. I'm like, have you even read my profile? It's just like, come on, man, do your homework.
Yeah, seriously, come on.
It's not that hard. It's not like I'm hiding myself. Everything is pretty open and out there. As you've said many times, I'm on all the social platforms. You just do 2 minutes of Google search, you can find out something about me. And I try to do the same. I try to teach the same for sales people who are getting into this. It's very much the same in sales. So figure out a way to create a personal connection. And then that first meeting becomes a lot smoother, and it allows you to have an opening for your second meeting.
100%. You mentioned a couple mentors you had back in time. How do you form that connection? I bet so many young people just reach out to you for everything. As a younger person, I can tell you getting a mentor like yourself is actually really competitive. There are so many talented people out there. Besides doing a thorough research, what value can we add to you to make us stand out? What characteristic do you look for in people you may want to work with?
I look for people, again, it sounds simplistic, but who just need somebody to believe in them a little bit and somebody to help them gain a little bit of self-confidence. And so over the last couple of years, I think about some of the people I've mentored or taken under my wing. Velise Perez, who was super smart. From the moment I met her, I just could tell she was introduced by a mutual friend, and could tell she was just a bright light, but she wanted to out of her old career path into something new, and she just wanted somebody to believe that she could do it. Took a chance on her. Or another guy was a guy I hired when I was at LinkedIn. His name was Yannick Podar, and he wrote the most heartfelt LinkedIn message to me, actually, and said, hey, I've had some success, but I can't seem to get into a company that I really want to get into. There's many out there and they just won't even take a meeting with me, but you've had a career that I admire. Can you give me some help? And I said, okay, well, let's just meet for 30 minutes, have coffee together, and we'll chat, and I can give you maybe some pointers of like what to do. And it was so heartfelt and it was so honest and authentic. And we met and we ended up spending like an hour and a half together because it was just like a connection. I could tell this guy is so brilliant and smart, and he just needs somebody to like take a chance on him, believe. Because again, he didn't go to like a super fancy school, didn't have a great, he didn't work at Google or Facebook or Apple or one of those things, So, and at the end I said, maybe you should come work for me at LinkedIn, and maybe that was his plan all along, and it worked if it did, but at least the first outreach was just great, And then here in the last, year, I think, with everything going on in the world, last couple of years, I would say, just how do I help the next generation of smart people, entrepreneurs around the world now, help raise themselves, So there's a kid in Nigeria, Tamori, that I'm helping mentor. We spend time together, but mostly it's just like online. And he's got the best energy, and I can tell he also just wants people to believe in him, and he has so much infectious energy he wants to give back to the world. and he just needs a network of people who can help elevate him. So trying my hardest. It's not always easy, especially this time in lockdown, but certainly trying.
Totally. You mentioned about the second person who wanted to work at LinkedIn. You mentioned he's brilliant. Did you evaluate his technical skill in marketing? For example, is he good at running a certain campaign or knows how to drive sales, or he's just really hardworking and a quick learner? What characteristics did it speak to you?
It's a good question. It depends on the level. At that level, I look a lot for, I would say, aptitude and grit. Mm-hmm. Like, can you come in and roll up your sleeves and do the work? And to me, it seemed like he can absolutely come in, roll up his sleeves, do the work. I wouldn't say he was classified as like an expert in something. I think it's more when you get into the senior level, like mid-level, or maybe even like executive level, director or VP level, that you absolutely have to have some experience. It's hard to get into those levels unless you have a pretty solid track record. But when you're coming in at a more junior level, with, I would say, less than 5 years experience, it's a lot for me anyway about like the aptitude. Like if somebody has the mental capability of like figuring out hard problems or being creative about how to actually go to market and roll up their sleeves and work their ass off to achieve it. I often think when you take a chance on someone, and it hasn't failed me yet, who just, again, needs somebody to believe in them, they will work their ass off to prove that they can do it and they belong. And they will go above and beyond, which is always such a joy to see, because they're like, okay, they're so hungry to prove themselves. And just like I was once in my life, I was so hungry to prove myself. I just, wanted that. And it's such a joy when you see somebody succeed because of what they're discovering about themselves, but also the work that they're producing. Because at the end of that journey, if it's 3 years or 5 years or 10 years, you'll have learned a hell of a lot about yourself and what gives you joy and energy and happiness. But you'll also hopefully do some of the best work of your life that you look back on and say, I did this. This is my calling card now. I'm really proud of this body of work that I did. And you can take that with you to your next conversation. Nobody can ever take that away from you. Mm-hmm. It's a big moment. I said this to my team the other day because we announced that Matterport is going public. It's so rare for a company to go public. It's such a moment. Most companies dream of this, and the fact that we're doing it based on the success that everyone has worked so hard for in the last year is so huge. Nobody can ever take that away from you. So enjoy it. Work hard to make it a success, but nobody can ever take that away from you. No matter if you stay with Matterport for 3 years or 5 years, your next job conversation, you'll be like, I helped take Matterport public and make it a massive success. That's a huge milestone that you should be proud of. It's something worth celebrating.
Absolutely. I love your energy. Being hungry and having grit are characteristics that you should have regardless of what you do. You started your career as a programmer. Your boss told you you are a product marketer. You mentioned that there were 4 types of marketing leaders out there. How does someone figure out which type of marketer they are? At one point, you had to transition from a tactical marketing person to a marketing leader. What skills do you need to pick up to establish yourself as a CMO? If I work in marketing or one day eventually want to be a leader like yourself, what are some skills do I need to equip myself for my next job search?
Well, I think in order to be a great marketing leader, you have to really understand all the disciplines of marketing. It's very hard, I think, to be successful at a VP or C level if you don't. Now, again, you don't have to be an expert in everyone. I honestly think it's impossible to be an expert in all the disciplines of marketing. Revenue marketing, product marketing, brand marketing, communications, you name it. There's a bunch of them out there. Like, I think there's 4 core ones, but there's probably many more. You should understand all of them, and you have to understand how they all kind of play together if you want to be a successful leader. So that's, I think, when you get there. But in order to get there, how do you even get started? I think when you're starting out your career, I'm always a fan of trying to broaden yourself out as much as you can. In the first, let's call it 3 to 5 years of your career, you should try as many things within marketing, because you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you're good at. You don't know what gives you joy. You don't know what people value, right? And so trying out event marketing, customer marketing, revenue marketing, operations, product marketing, I like storytelling, or I like dealing with people. So maybe it's about communications. Maybe you're super creative and it's more around, design and branding and all those kinds of things. Always I would recommend to somebody, try out as many things, because that gives you a broad perspective that then you can then go home. At some point, you have to, I think, specialize. It's very hard to become a leader if you don't specialize at some point, because you have to become known for something. Like, oh, Grace is the best at this, or Robin's the best at this. Maybe not the best, but you're at least in the top tier. Like, you have to be known for something. And so you have to specialize, I think, at some point. And still keep your mind open to all the other disciplines, but specializing in something. And how do you find that specialization? Well, I think you find something that you get joy out of doing. Because again, in marketing, it's about a transfer of excitement, enthusiasm, and ideas. If you don't believe in what you're doing, it's very hard to wake up every day feeling true excitement about the work you're supposed to do. And so that means that finding something that ultimately, I think, gives you energy and makes you happy. So if you're the kind of person who likes sitting and tweaking and optimizing spreadsheets and analytical dashboards every day, great. There's a job for you in marketing for that. If you're the kind of person who likes being out there talking to customers or press or speaking at events all the time, there's a job for you in marketing. But you've got to find out what gives you joy, because ultimately people can always tell what it is that gives you the most energy, and they will lean into that, I think, a lot. All the conversations when I try to do mentoring or leadership development of my team, it's like doubling down on people's strengths, and certainly, how do we elevate and try to focus on some of the weaknesses and turn them into something that actually becomes a superpower. And because trying to force people into something that they're not rarely works. But that's one aspect of it. I think the other aspect is you should also step outside of your comfort zone a little bit and try to do things that, like force you to the edge a little bit of your capabilities, because that's how growth happens. Growth doesn't happen as much if you're just always playing in your comfort zone. So you can step to the edge of your comfort zone within your domain, or you can step to the edge of your comfort zone in another domain, right? And so there's both ways of doing it depending on what you're ultimately trying to do. If you're trying to be, again, a CMO or a VP of marketing, stepping to the edge of a comfort zone in other domains, it's probably a good idea because you have to understand them. If you're just trying to be the best brand leader in the world, stepping to the edge of your comfort zone in that domain is something you should force yourself to do all the time to hone and sharpen those skills.
Totally. That's so well put. You answered all my questions within one answer. If someone wants to work in marketing, how should they acquire the skills? What are some best resources? Of course, the best way to learn is probably getting a job in marketing. But before we get into that position, how should we educate ourselves? You also funded by founders. It's a VC firm. What is something every startup founder should know about marketing? How should we teach ourselves the basics?
Well, we're lucky that we live in a world where there's just so much access to information, which is great. It can sometimes be a little overwhelming because you go search out there. It's just, where do you even start, right? And everyone has an opinion, and some of them are better than others. I think some of the resources that I use, there's a lot of great podcasts. For me, I get inspiration when I'm not always standing in front of my computer. So when I'm walking or running or something, and I put on a podcast, and there's so many great marketing podcasts out there. CMO Conversations, I think Drift has done that. There's the Man-Gen Visionaries, which is like a lot of CMO conversation. And there you get the full spectrum of people who are brand focused or revenue focused and other things. I think Dave Gerhardt has an amazing podcast and community that he's building out. He's a great marketing leader. Daniel Murray with the Marketing Millennials is always posting great content. There's so much good content out there. One of the reasons I love LinkedIn so much is kind of my jam, is because I feel like every time I go into the feed, it's like a mini TED Talk. It's like there's always some kind of inspiration. I've always loved the format of TED Talks, 10, 15, 20 minutes, and you just get super inspired. But even nowadays, I don't have much time for sitting and watching that. So going into LinkedIn, it's always a bunch of inspiration. I feel like it's a mini TED Talk in my feed that'll tell me about a new trend or something that I should know about. And it's really just, it's amazing. And you see all the people participating in that. It's a pretty magical thing. And it's a pure platform because I think people take real pride in who they are and how they represent themselves. I feel like a lot of other platforms, they end up digressing into something that's not that positive, which I don't spend that much time on Twitter or Facebook, because I feel like the anonymity that you get sometimes there is not super healthy. But LinkedIn is like, you take pride in who you are and how you show up and what you say. And I think that's a good thing. You should take accountability for who you are and what you say, but most of all, I think the best starting point, honestly, to me is the LinkedIn feed.
The
Go
LinkedIn feed?
go subscribe to and follow a lot of these marketing leaders, and they just post amazing content.
100%. Definitely follow Robin on LinkedIn. You're definitely one of the most active executives on LinkedIn, maybe because of you previously worked at LinkedIn. The positive energy is so contagious. It always motivates me to do more. Whenever I'm on LinkedIn, your status will show up in my feed. Tons of people likes it. Definitely worth following. You mentioned marketing has 3 core elements: building awareness, drive revenue, and sales. You've worked at internet security company, LinkedIn, Box, WeWork, now Matterport. They're all in different industries. What are some similarities and differences when you are helping them building their awareness, increasing their revenue and sales?
Yeah, I try not to stay deep in the sector. I like to switch between, because it just broadens my mind a little bit. The similarity is they're all B2B companies. And what has attracted me to a lot of these companies is the opportunity to tell very human stories and market, honestly, a lot of times like a B2C company. Mm-hmm. It's just so true. No matter who you ask, tell me some brands that you love. It's nearly always B2C companies. Like 99.9% of the time, it's a B2C company. Oh, I love Nike or Lululemon or Patagonia, I love all these brands. I love Tesla and Apple and so on. Okay, great. So if that's the case, why are you not just marketing like a B2C company? Now, that's a little bit easier said than done, because B2C is a little bit more simple in terms of just who you're reaching. You're reaching just directly to your customer many times. But in B2B, it's a little bit more complex. You can market, I think, like a B2C company in like the highest level, or like when you first try to grab people's attention. But of course, quickly in B2B, it gets very complicated because you have multiple buyers. You're oftentimes dealing with very expensive products or products that are bigger, like trying to go and sign up at WeWork for an office space for your company is oftentimes a multi-million-dollar commitment. It's not like one person makes that decision alone, right? So you're dealing with multiple people, long sales cycles, lots of approvals and so on. So it gets more complicated lower down, but the highest level, people are people. Like, market to them like they're human. Tell interesting, quirky, surprising, delightful stories to get their attention, to make them feel like what it is that you can solve for them. And then, of course, at the next level down, you have to get much more deep around how do we solve that for you or your company. And so when I think about, my journey, we work very much about a community-based, heart and soul company, very kind of spiritual, and a lot of like putting itself out there. In many ways, the marketing was much more like a consumer company, and I love that. But it was a B2B company. You don't sell office space to an individual; you sell to a company. Same with LinkedIn, right? Many of us think of LinkedIn as a consumer platform, but it's not. That's not how LinkedIn makes money. LinkedIn makes money out of selling a B2B product to other companies. And Salesforce, the same. I think Salesforce was where I really kind of learned this skill. Is they're hardcore B2B, CRM system, marketing automation, platform you can develop on, very nerdy stuff, but they always market themselves much more human. And they put a human angle to it because it's the juxtaposition of that hardcore tech that makes you relate to it. And I think that's very special. So I've always tried to take that with me. I would say that's the commonality. The industry is not the commonality. And so I don't think this notion that people have to stay in an industry to be successful. I mean, I'd like to think that I'm proof that you don't have to, but have a thesis and a point of view about what it is that you're trying to achieve.
How do you humanizing something that's B2B? Because like you said, whenever I think about LinkedIn or Salesforce, I always feel like they are a consumer tech company because their brand is so out there. Yeah. Curious, how do you even put that image into people's head?
It takes, I would say, lots of thought and care into how you want to communicate. So you have to talk like a human. You have to communicate, in ways that sound like you're not trying to spew off buzzwords, but like how you would talk to your mother or your friend or whoever it is about your product and company. So you have to talk like a human. You have to think about being surprising or delightful. And then I think you have to really put time and effort behind it. It's kind of like, you want to build a brand and a strong go-to-market, it just takes time and effort. But you have to have a plan to actually go execute. So I think if you want to execute great B2B campaigns that connect on a human level, you got to figure out what is it that you can do that makes you special in that area. Is it the language? Is it the colors? Is it the feeling? How do you evoke that? I think it used to be, honestly, a little bit harder, I would say. I think it's actually easier. And the reason why it's easier is because people now, to split between their personal life and their work life is gone. I don't know if that's a healthy thing for other reasons, but from a work perspective, it's not like people suddenly take off their work hat and suddenly like you're just kind of everything is blending together, which means you could be reading an article about some work-related stuff, and then suddenly something shows up that tells a story about something. Or you could be in your Facebook feed and suddenly a B2B message shows up, but it's very human. I think you have such opportunity for really connecting with people, and the technologies are there so you can hit people at the right time with the right message. But it takes thought. It's not, and so you got to experiment. You got to try things out. You got to really lean into that model. Don't shy away from it. And the final thing I would say is either you have to have a strong perspective on it, or you have to hire some writers and some team members who have a strong perspective. Because if you try to do things by committee, it nearly never works, because it always gets watered down into the lowest common denominator for some reason. And so you got to have a strong perspective on this. I came into Matterport. I said, we have incredible technology. It's game changing. The world doesn't know about it. Let's lean into making this more human in the language that we show up in on our website, in the emails that we send out, in the customer focus that we have. Let's not focus on us. Let's focus on them, on how great they are. And that's a way of also showing, I think, humanity in B2B.
Wow. I think that's so well said. Yeah, thank you so much, Robin. Okay, so we are in the 1 minute fire round session. What's your favorite book?
My favorite book is a book called Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse.
Oh, nice. I was gonna say, like, is Little Mermaid from Denmark? That would be my favorite book.
Little Mermaid from Denmark. That's right.
I really want to visit Denmark to visit Little Mermaid. Like, I know there's like a mermaid sculpture, right? Yeah.
Yes. I would say though, I worked in hospitality when I was a teenager at a hotel, and it's a little underwhelming. It's great. It's a historical thing, but it's so small. We had a lot of tourists who would come and think, oh, it's like this huge statue. It's like 3 foot high. It's like, it's hard, but it's still cool. It's still cool to experience it. But that is not the highlight of Denmark. There are many cooler things, I would say, than the Little Mermaid.
I'm also excited about the Danish, like the pastry. I am really excited. Yeah.
It's an abomination what people call Danish in the US.
Who made the biggest impact in your career?
Who made the biggest impact in my career? It was probably, I think maybe Sean Whiteley certainly made a big impact in my career. He was my boss at Salesforce for a while. He's founded many companies since then and sold all of them. He's very successful, but he was a great marketer, but he also brought a lot of humanity to the marketing, which I think I really appreciated. Him, and then I would say Whitney Bauk, who hired me at Box. She was a great leader as well, and really nurtured me to become, I think, in many ways, the leader I am today.
Wow. Who would you invite to a dinner party?
I would love to invite Steven Spielberg to my dinner party. I'm a big movie fan, because I think movies are great lessons in storytelling. I just think he's one of the best storytellers. I think Chris Nolan would be really interesting as well, who made Inception and Interstellar,
the Batman guy.
And so on.
Yeah,
and I'm a huge fan right now of the Marvel universe. Like WandaVision was such a great show. It was like, oh, it was so great. I think Elizabeth Olsen was just phenomenal in that role as Scarlet Witch. So I would invite entertainers, because I just feel like they're so inspiring to me.
What's your favorite movie? This is on the spot because you mentioned about these directors.
So I don't. I'm a movie fan, so I sometimes have these conversations. One of my favorite movies of all time is Schindler's List, but it's not a movie you can watch often because it's pretty hard to watch, and it's heartbreaking. But there's so much hope in it as well, and resilience and grit. And it's so well made. Again, Steven Spielberg movie, obviously. And I think it's one of the best movies. But I think, so for like, of all time, I would probably say Schindler's List. But I think, recent memory, like movie that always entertains me and just keeps me motivated is like Inception. I think it's just a great movie, really.
Totally. Where can we find you outside of work?
You can find me oftentimes outside. I love running. I love nature. I love taking walks anywhere where there's like some good trails and so on. And it's funny, coming from the Bay Area, it was very like mountains and hills and so on. Here it's completely flat. The highest point in Denmark is like 400 feet. So it's very flat. So it's very much walking in the woods or by the beach and so on. But that's where I get my most creative moments. It's when I am outside, honestly. So I try to take as much advantage of that as I can, either running or walking. And so you can oftentimes find me running with some earbuds and listening to some podcasts or some good music. That's what I do.
Nice. Did you just run a marathon?
I just signed up for a marathon. I'm doing one in 2 months. I usually did. I committed to myself when I turned 35 many years ago. I'm not going to say how old I am, but many years ago, I committed to myself that I was going to run a marathon every year. And I didn't get to do one last year because of COVID. And so I'm going to try to do 2 this year if I can, to make up for it. Yeah. So I have one coming up in May in Copenhagen.
Yeah, I think the best part about a marathon is like you really training for it, right? Like I think of training, it's really exercise.
It is. And then the thing is about a marathon, I don't do it because I'm the fastest or the best. I do it because it always teaches me something about myself. It's really a lesson to me in like keeping with it. There's always a moment in any run where I go, this sucks. I want to stop. This is not fun anymore. But then it's that mental, like you have to overcome that moment, because it's the same at work. There's going to be days that suck, that you don't enjoy, and if you can break through those barriers, you're going to be a lot stronger, I think, because of it. So that's why I run, especially try to sign up for these longer races, because I have to overcome something that I think is pretty tough for me anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. That's such a great thing to do. And where do you get inspiration for marketing?
Yeah, I get it. Again, when I'm out, usually in society, is kind of observing. I get it from my friends. I get it certainly from people I have met online. I get it from reading. I love reading a lot. I don't actually read that many business books. I read mostly fiction because I get more joy out of that. Just wherever it happens, I try to be open to learning wherever I can be.
Thank you so much, Robin, for coming out to the show today.
Thank you, Grace. It was so great to see you.
All right. That's all we have for today. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Smart Venture Podcast. If you like it, please leave us a quick review and hit subscribe so you don't miss any tips from the experts. If you want to receive our updates, please leave your email at smartventurepod.com. If you want to connect with me, all my socials are at Grace Gong GG. Besides LinkedIn, it's just Grace Gong. I'd love to connect with you and let me know your thoughts about the show. Now you can also listen to Smart Venture Podcast on YouTube. Go to smartventurepod.com, click the YouTube link on the top banner. Don't forget to hit subscribe and smash the like button. See you next time.